So yeah, if anyone here is not on Circle yet, I highly recommend you to join to stay up to date about these types of events as we notify you all and as we schedule these. So I'll put that link on the chat. And I'm super excited to have Rob today. Rob is he's an excellent coach, and he has a really deep, profound philosophy behind it that grounds his work. And it's a lovely framework, very applied, but also very deep in its insights about what it means for us to identify with things, to identify things in the world. And anyway, he just redefines the concept of identity very nicely. And I'm looking forward to this. All right.
Yeah. Thank
I'll
you.
move over to Greg, and then you can hand it over to Rob.
Lovely. Yeah, I want to say a few things. So Rob's a dear friend of mine, and actually helped me some through his framework and through his friendship to see the world in a way that I think is powerful, useful, flexible, deep, and rich. And so I really encourage us. I think I call it the best goddamn cognitive therapy I've ever seen. And I say that as somebody who worked with Beck, because what Rob does is he really helps us see what I would call technically our epistemic frames and the way in which we see through the world. And then that gives us an enormous power for how to be in the world. And so it's a great honor and pleasure to hand this over to Rob Scott and share with us the insights that he had on a pretty amazing life journey. So Rob, thanks so much.
I just got chills. Excuse me. That's amazing. Thank you, Greg. That means the world. I appreciate your friendship. I'm so glad that I've brought value at all to anything, and certainly to you. And yeah, so thank you very much. So I'm really excited to do this. I want to say, first off, before I start most talks, I like to say I'm deeply interested in useful over true. And maybe it'll expose itself in this talk today that I have an interesting relationship to truth and how difficult and messy and exact or inexact that can be at times. So I'm not making necessarily any claims that I'm right or permanently right. You're not going to watch me like hardly trying to justify for anything. However, I'm going to justify a lot of things, hoping that they're useful to you, ultimately, so that you can experience something in yourself that is profound and different and is potentially changing, life-changing for you at its peak. And so this might be really valuable. And if it is, see if you can bring your full attention, right? Because I want to talk about profound change with you. And, is profound change something that will fit into your current model of the world, your current model of yourself? And if it's not, it's like, oh, I'm just kind of interested or curious or whatever. And you can be that way. That's totally perfect. But this is an invitation to say that there might be something here for you that's profound, and it might be something that leads to living very differently. And again, that might not be important to you, but if it is, I'm just inviting that space. So, see if you can bring your full attention, see if you can not do a whole lot of like, I know what that is. Come to these things fresh and see if there's like a new experience here, potentially. Quick side note, I'm really glad this is primarily, I hope, a discussion first, because this is not a polished presentation. I have far too many slides, and I really sort of struggle with almost like where to begin at this. So I definitely have a beginning point, but I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then I have a bunch of different slides that I could use to kind of support that. I want to take us through some concepts. I also don't want to bore people that already know the concept. So it's sort of like, and then I have a ton more slides like kind of at the ready. And if I get lucky, maybe some of those will help answer some questions if we need that, or we'll be able to do that in dialogue. But I mostly am excited about the dialogue with you guys and the sort of workshop-y kind of vibe that I think this could be. So I also want to invite that. So the talky talk stuff that I want to do at the beginning of this is maybe to set some claims, again, not with like a huge justificatory thing, but just like, is this useful for you? So a big idea that I'm really hoping we can get to with this is that it's potentially that we represent the world more than we actually live in the world in a meaningful way. And so I'm suggesting we're living more in our representation of the world than we are the world itself. And that representation of the world is what I call our self-world model, right? And this is going on for us moment to moment. You could also call that the agent in the arena model. And the agency part of that is really important. Again, a lot of equating, some of these things are different words on purpose. So we can equate them at times, and then they might be slightly different at times. One might be a little bit bigger or smaller at times. But if we think about agency, that's a big part of what I'm talking about with your identity, right? So your identity is going to be the agency part of your self-world model, but the whole thing is being modeled by you. Like even the world is being modeled by you. So if I were to ask you, like, what do you know about the globe? What do you know about space? Like you've got a model of all these things that you don't identify as, but they're still in your self-world model in an interesting way, okay? The agency part of that is really important. And I'll use AI to illustrate why agency is so important. We have, whatever full artificial intelligence might be presently, like we're looking at it, chat, GPT, all these things, they're smarter than any of us, right? It can outline any book we want. It can do all these things, right? So we have intelligence, we have artificial intelligence, and that'll show up in all these other ways too. The concerns that people have with AI are, I would argue, much more around agentic intelligence that is way smarter than us. So if it's just smart and it doesn't have any concerns or cares or internal modeling that it's trying to win at, we're not as scared of it. In fact, it could be this incredibly useful tool and really amazing. Now, there's challenges with all of these, but it's the agentic part that really matters that we get to really care about. And to just make that point a little bit clearer, if you walk into a room that has a plant, you're probably not as concerned as if you walk into a room that has a bear in it. Right. So the agency of that bear and what it might want and what it might be capable to do to you is important. So understanding that agency matters is really important, and understanding our own agency and the agency of others is really important. And one of the shortcuts to do this is understanding this way that we're representing the world, both how we're identifying in it in the moment, but also our model of the world. And I think that becomes one of the shortcuts to wisdom. Right. So there's a lot of I could be wise at the financial markets. It's not going to lead to necessarily any more wisdom with that, but it's a more foundational wisdom if we can begin to see the model that we're living in rather than having it kind of occur to us more as a truth. Right. It ends up becoming more of an option space, and it gives us a lot more freedom and ability to change ourselves, to grow, to do all these things. And so if we start to go, okay, I can understand what he means by representation, which we'll get to. I don't expect that to be immediately obvious. But once you do that, we start to go, okay, well, how much of that representation can be changed? And is it possible that that's not the only thing I can identify with? Like the identification of that representation is what our identity is presently. Is there anything else besides the representation that I could identify with? Like maybe something a little bit more grounded or essential or not interpreted, not mentated, but actually experienced. So what are you identifying with, or more correctly, what are you identified as, is what your identity ends up being. And so that is both moment to moment, meaning that it's shifting and changing much more frequently than most of us realize. But then it's also this kind of convenient story or pattern that we can go back to should we become self-reflective and have to report on ourselves or say, I'm really good at this, or I'm bad at that, or I'm a loser, or whatever those things are. And so does it mean anything if we can change how we're identifying moment to moment? And does it mean anything if we could change the patterns of our identity so that we truly grow and feel different in any moment? And if that's true, if that means something, right, if that's a meaningful thing to do, how do we do it, right? How do we do it? So a claim here is that if you shift what you're identified with or what you're identifying as, we've shifted you in a very meaningful way. So the title of this talk is, we're really talking about trying to redefine transformation in a meaningful way. And that's about this fundamental identity shift. Okay, so let me just talk about the different parts of that really quickly, and then I can pause and we can talk for a minute, or we can go right into some slides. It is a fundamental shift to deeply realize that you're in a representation. If that becomes true for you, I'm going to suggest that will be a fundamental shift to you, just to have the realization of it. Identity shifting would then be both the set of tools and the skills that help you manage and optimize that representation over time. And what it looks like, both internally and from the outside, is that looks like wisdom. You start making easier and more wise choices with how you feel, how you behave, how you mentate things, okay? Then there might be a more deeply and more permanent fundamental shift, which would be moving your identification from that representation, from thinking I'm this self over time, et cetera, much more into some collective isness that's really beautiful. And when that becomes available, what can open up for us is a more profound, again, all of these are judgment statements. I'm not going to stick to too many of these, but I'm trying to point to something. It's a more profound love of what is, whether that isness is good or bad, however that isness shows up. So there's a way where we can ground ourselves meaningfully in the all of the isness in a profound way, and either identify as nothing, which would be, a lot of people would call that no self, or the same way that is, just talking about it differently, would be identifying with everything, like in a way that it's all me, right? It's the dissolution of this represented self and into an isness that's really profound and beautiful. And then the representations are still there. You just have a deeply different wisdom with it. And so you're managing yourself and your agency very differently. And so another way to talk about that is we could identify, instead of deeply as this separate self that's trying to win and compete and do all these things, but more identify as the whole who has access to separate selves in a really meaningful way. And so that's a lot of words. And I'm hoping that by the end of this talk, those words make more sense to you than they might right now. I would love to prove to you that representation is what's happening, but not just by justifying it, by trying to bring it into an experience for you so that you can see, oh, I am doing this representation thing. And then experience what might we be experiencing? Well, there's a couple things there. We could move your identity around a little bit to show you that shifting agency that's happening. And we can do that by changing the representation. But also by experiencing isness directly in a meaningful way, and just bringing maybe more attention and relevance to that than you usually might. And so what's really neat is, I promise, if you're conscious and aware and agentic enough to be here, you have all the skills to do all of this. None of this is away from you. And what's really neat is the more powerful parts of this are more realizations and wake-ups than they are things that take time to develop. Some of the identity shifting skills, because they're self, and because they're self, we'll get in hopefully later to time and what time is doing versus now. Some of those skills will develop over time for sure, but the realization and the profundity of what you can understand, there's no path to it. It's more a realization. It can happen in any moment. So I have a bunch of other ideas. That's a fair intro right there, but just to sort of put some other words out there that we can maybe hang ideas on later. I'm going to try to show you that, like, pretty much everything you care about is mental, meaning some of you may be much more grounded in an isness than I know. So I'm not claiming this about any of you directly necessarily, but I would say most people are caring most about what they're modeling or what is mental, right? What do people think of me? And when am I going to achieve that thing? All that. And in the reality of those things, we make them real, but they're really models of judgments and justifications and things like that. I have some slides. I don't know if we'll get to them or not, but I sort of talk about, like, what is your mom to you? Well, your mom is a bunch of meanings that you have about your mom, right? This is what she did when I was young. This is what she's good at. I love when I get hugged. She's warm. She's wonderful. The caring that you have about your mom is all that mentation that you have about your mom. And a way to sort of think about that is, if you got Alzheimer's or had amnesia, all of a sudden that wouldn't be your mom anymore. So that same person could be right there, but without that mentation on top, you don't have the same care. You don't have, the same access to mom. And so this is the thought bubble that we're living in, that we're almost mistaking for reality in a sense. And so the slides I want to show you, I have a bunch that I could start with. I definitely want to show you guys lenses a little bit. I have an experience that I call Attention is a Place that's really powerful. I'm also going to talk about sort of almost the map of our world in 3 dimensions. And I think I'll start there. And one of the things I want to call out with that is that there's different levels of reality to us, right? There's our own individual reality, which is very real. But then we have this collective reality, which is where we can share ideas and prove them and justify them across. And that's very real also. And then maybe there's this other level of sort of oneness or something that might be differently real in another way. but memory in the collective is really important. So I have cool slides if we get to them about what memory is doing to us. And then consciousness in the collective versus like your own sort of separate dream stuff versus like a shared collective consciousness. What might that be? So just personal reality versus collective reality, they matter and they get confusing to us as humans. And so I think we can point out some ways to simplify some of that. And some other stuff we'll get into, hopefully lenses and beliefs and stuff. But just to say the words, I think it's important to realize that we're constantly trying to coarse grain down reality into something that we can understand. And reality is bigger than any of us would understand. And I can point to some proofs for that, which is like, Gödel's incompleteness theorem and things like that, right? The self-referential nature of us in reality, that separation from it doesn't naturally include us in it in a way that gives us a real perspective. And so that imaginary third person perspective of that can see all and know all is a model more than it's any place we can really get to in our experience day to day. And so that's also confusing to us. And so it creates beliefs and lenses and delusions for us in a way that leave us less functional than we can be normally. So I want to just take a pause. That's a ton of words, but you guys are all super smart and great. Is this exciting? Is this crazy? How are we doing? Any questions? Any like, you're a liar, that's wrong, let's like fight about, who wants to fight? No? Anybody? No fight?
Rob, you had a lot of words there, covered a lot of things, and you forecasted a lot of things. And
I did.
Yeah. So, grasping the whole of what you said can be quite difficult. But what I take from that, I relate almost directly to something I think of as a subject-object theory.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, is that a correct interpretation of what you're talking about?
I probably have slides with that in it, like open on my desktop right now. Yeah, subject object is huge in this, and I really appreciate those words. Yeah,
and that you can change the model, and in fact, we are actually all living in some representation. Mm-hmm. Even when we get enlightened and we think we've gone out of our representation, we've only gone into a new one. Right.
That may be an idea itself, but yeah, I'm with you on that. So yeah, to what degree? And Greg and I have had some really good talks about that, where it's like, well, even the senses that you're trying to point to are representations, and so yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then for changing the model, I'm a very practical. I'm a practitioner. I'm a consultant, a management consultant. So I have a practical mindset. I have to make a living.
Yeah.
And so I spend my time changing people's representations through language.
Yeah.
And I assume you're going to get there as well.
I mean, yeah, it is one of our best tools to change the model is talking and sharing ideas. Yeah, for sure. That's great. So, and just not, there's no critique in here at all, but notice how easy it is to say, I am a this, or I am a that, right? And here's why. I'm analytical because I'm a consultant and that's how I make my living. Right. So there's this, and I believe you, like, I'm sure that's what you are. But you also could be 1,000 other things too. But that's a thing that is sort of being served up as the platform of your assumptions about yourself, and you're living from there in this moment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, there's sort of a little tick I have mentally. I mean to say what I do is not what I am is.
Yeah.
But it's just the normal conversation. People are always saying, I am a consultant.
Yeah, I don't think it's your tick. I think it's what the self is doing, right? It's like the coarse graining that sort of smooths all this complexity out for us is, I'm going to argue, maybe why the self sort of evolved in a way, right? Like it is a really good way to take a certain agency and not have to rethink things. It ends up these assumptive platforms that we're looking through that give us our relevance in the moment and do all this stuff. And so then when we report on that, it makes sense to own it as us. And that's where we're pointing to the inside of that self-world model instead of, clearly being objective with it.
And then there's also the multiple us, because I also paint and I also play a musical instrument. I'm a father, a grandfather.
Yeah.
There are many roles and you move between them.
Totally. And so that's a linguistic thing too. Like, is that a role or is that like a different you, in a sense? And which one's more useful to do? And can we talk about it both ways and shift and be fluid enough to know when it's appropriate to talk about those both ways? Another way to think about that is I am no longer my 5-year-old self at all, right? And that probably not physically at all, certainly not mentally at all, but it's easy to identify as that child and talk about it and shift back to that and give agency to that. So I'm also not the self I was 10 minutes ago because we've added to it and there's more here, et cetera. So we're constantly changing, but it's really useful to have a story of me that's made up of all these memories. And I think a huge part of therapy is going back to make some of those memories that are coming in to affect how I show up now. If I can change the meaning of those, I can literally change my personal past, right? I can change the identity level story of me in a really meaningful way. So that's a great interaction. Like, thank you for that, Jeffrey. That's great stuff. Does anybody else have any thoughts or anything they want to share before I get into stuff? Cool. Okay. So let's see what I could do in this time. I don't know. I've already talked a long time, so maybe it'll be less than I hope. I have this cool stuff on like non-dual, and like I have slides on the maybe story, that story about the horses and the maybe, maybe like with the neighbor, maybe you guys are familiar with it, but I have like slides for that lead into this other thing. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to do that first. I think I'll do the sort of where are we thing first. Let me see if I can get that started. And then, yeah, we'll do this. And then I will share #technology. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to find that guy, not the presenter display.
As Rob's pulling this up, I'll just say a real quick comment that I think is just some of the things. So how do we understand the world? Almost, you can really argue the world's sort of an intersection between the frame that we're bringing to bear and what's inside that frame at some level. And yet we experience the world just as presenting to us. And then as we frame it and when we model ourselves over time. So for me, at least, Rob's stuff not only highlights that conceptually, but enables us to grip it and relate to it in a very profound way. So thanks for that intro.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So are we, am I sharing my screen? Okay, it says, where are we? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And it's not the presenter display, right? It's just that slide. Perfect. Okay. So, where are we, right? If we start talking about like, what is the real world and where are we living, et cetera, let's see how this all works. So we might call, the globe or this shared place that we're in, the real world. We also might call it the physical world. If we look at this, if I say, okay, the physical world, parts of that are other people, physical objects. It certainly has the now in it, right? Like it's what I'm looking at. It also probably has your arising internal sensations, like all in that physicality of the physical world. So this is your body. This is also the collective that we're in. And a lot of us would say this is the real world, right? This is like, that guy's off in space somewhere. He's not in the real world. This is where we're all trying to meet and get our culture to work in the real world, okay? We'd also call this reality in a sense. So there's also our mental world that we have that we're living in, all right? And I'm going to argue that this is not reality. Of course, it depends on what we mean by reality, but in that sort of normal term of how we would say, like, why is mentation not reality? Because that homeless guy on the corner is insane and he's not living in reality. He's not meeting us in the rest of reality. So we have this potential mental space of modeling that could be incredibly accurate and great and really be it's certainly individually real. I would argue for that homeless guy, it's real for him, but it's not the collective shared reality. And that's all I mean by that. Okay. Parts of this mentation might include like VR and AR. And later, I think you'll see I sort of straddle that because there's parts of that there. If it's, augmented reality, it might be sort of in reality, but it's mental in some sense. This is our imagination. This is our thoughts. This is our dreams, like when we're asleep. And I'm going to argue this is also where past and future live in a meaningful way for us, right? We have to mentate about the past. We have to imagine the future in a sense. So these are mental. And words I use for this sometimes are mentation. I might call this modeling or mental modeling. And I might say it's your mind in a sense, okay? Then we have this sort of ground level energy. And this ground level energy is what I'm going to call just isness. And all I mean by that, it's what is, right? This is like an arising of the energy that's kind of making all this stuff happen. And that's why I'm putting it a little bit more foundational. Other words that I, or maybe even others might use, non-duality may kind of exist down in this isness more naturally. This is potentially the all, right? Just anything that is. Your mentation is, that person is, right? Any of that isness. I'm also going to say this is experience itself. I'm going to say this is potentially where we have access to oneness. And this might be what people are trying to point to when they talk about things like God, et cetera. Okay. So if we take this stack of realities here that we're trying to navigate and play with, how are they connected? What's going on here? Well, it might be useful to think that they actually kind of nest in a way. So in what ways might they nest? Well, in that world of like physical reality, shared collective space, we might have a mind that's arising within that, right? So like within my body, I might have a mind that might be useful, but also on the world, certainly there's many mentations. I would argue probably within each of us, there's many mentations in different ways. Okay. And in another sense, if this is the globe or something, there might be many globes within the energy, the isness, but certainly the energy isness is what's making up this matter and all that too. So in another way, we could say this is sort of nested in this sense. And we could go even as far as multiverse and get weird with it and whatever that is. Okay. But if we come back to this and we say, okay, there's energy and matter, and then there is mind. And this might be a neat little stacking. And you could see it's almost like, Greg's got slides where we're sort of building complexity on top. If I were to turn this to the side, it would be like energy makes matter. And then we have mentation on top, right? So this shouldn't be too strange to people that are familiar with any of that stuff. And instead of energy, I'm again going to call that like isness, right? Because let's say it's more complex than just what physics might call energy or something. So again, just isness is ground level simply because, I think I went by that slide too quickly. Let me see if I can back up. Doop, doop, doop. I've already said it and I don't have time to do this. So essentially, when transitions go too slow. Okay, so again, it all has the quality of isness or just something that is, right? Something that is. That's how simply we can like get down to what I'm talking about with isness. All right. So again, this is the energy, but let's put that away for a second. Let's just talk about the normal world that most people are living in, right? We're navigating this kind of shared collective world with the physical and all that stuff. And we're also dealing with our own mentation as well. And what we might notice that happens sometimes, like if you were asleep and dreaming, the experience of that subjectively for you is that the dream actually gets pasted over in a meaningful way your physical reality, right? We don't have any like direct access to that shared collective in that. Our whole world is now in some dream space. And so that dream, we can have the experience if we're deeply in a dream of just the entire world being us in a sense. And we might say that's our dream. But notice that even in that dream, we've subjected and objected out into that dream. So in my dream, I am a character in the rest of what my whole mentation is doing, but I'm not identifying with. Does that make sense? So there's like a nested sense, like individually, I can also go out into subject object where I'm creating all of it in my mind, arguably, but I'm only identifying with part of it in that dream. And what this slide is trying to show is that while that dream is happening, I don't really have any access to that physical realm meaningfully. Okay. And so here's that slide where if we look at VR, AR, if we're experiencing something like that, there's an argument where it might be over physical reality in some way and some combination of the two. Okay. So I just want to honor that and realize that. But then we also have VR, AR reality. If we're immersed in it, that would be like a kid up not coming to dinner because he's like playing a game online or whatever, totally pasted over the physical world. That's entirely their full reality in that moment. And so we have this ability to paste the mental over and fully experience that and not really be in touch in our waking consciousness in any way or in our awareness consciousness in any way with the shared world. And we could imagine this being the case if like a mom were to yell up at her son, honey, please, come back to the real world and just join us for dinner, right? We could identify with that. And this is, potentially going to be more and more a problem for us is as we're drifting into screens, as we're drifting into our own little social media channels, as we're drifting into more immersive stuff. Apple's pretty good at making products. When we see what their VR, AR, thing coming out is going to be, we'll see how much we're all just kind of walking around in our own world even more deeply. All right. But I'm going to make this argument that we're already doing this. We're already doing this way more than we realize. And so if we just look at thoughts, if we bring up our thinking, What most of us are doing, and again, claim, I don't have the math on this. There's not a study, but it seems obvious to me that most of us are pasting our thoughts onto reality all the time. And this is that model that we're living in. Okay. So, I walk into a kitchen, my system is capable of going refrigerator, art, white paint, like whatever I'm doing, all mentation things I've learned that's being pasted onto my reality all the time. And if we're in a relationship with somebody, you might imagine, I know exactly what happened. I was right there, but I don't know exactly what happened. I'm pasting a ton of my own information onto the situation. I'm judging in ways I don't see. I've got cognitive biases I don't see. I've got all this stuff. And then in a much more just, let's not go deep psychology on it. If we really think about this, most of us are just lost in thought all the time, right? What's happening tomorrow? My taxes done. What do I have to do? What do I have to do? And it's very hard to get back into a grounded, physical, presencing situation. Another way to say that is if you invite people to meditate who've never done it before, for a grand majority of people, it's terrible, right? It's very difficult to just be and say, focus on your breath. Just focus on your breath. Can you count to 10 with your breath? Very few people can do that unless they've practiced and tried. So this quality of pasting our thoughts onto the world is happening all the time. And so what ends up happening is, we think we're here and that's what we're walking around in, but we're actually here. That's what we're sort of lost in a meaningful way. And I'm going to suggest that is what I might call we're lost in thought, right? We're just deeply lost in thought. We're trying to justify our thought to everybody around us and make us right. Sometimes that's really useful and it's super smart, connected, amazing people doing that. But sometimes I'm trying to convince people I really am a loser or they really shouldn't hire me because we're self-sabotaging and doing all these different things because we're justifying thoughts that feel true to us, but they aren't necessarily true. Okay. So that's actually an okay place to pause because the next thing we're going to get into lenses a little bit and I could just steam on, but there's a lot there too. So let me see if I can get this back and I'll stop sharing just for a moment and just see if there's any questions. Does that make sense? Do you guys pick up what I'm putting down there? Is it dumb? Like so dumb. Why are we talking about that? Or is
Rob, I think the going from dream to AR, VR and pasting it on the real world is really good.
Yeah.
Because I dream a lot and I can relate. Like when I'm in the dream, it's real. Like last night, I had this weird dream where I climbed the Statue of Liberty and jumped into the ocean. And I did it like 10 times.
Amazing.
And when I was in it, that was real. You know, I mean, it was this crazy, I mean, it was insane.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you guys haven't played with AR, VR, like when you put the Oculus headset on, I mean, you want to talk about a different world. Like, I don't even know where the hell I am in the room. You know, I mean, it's just completely different. And then I love how you do that switch and you say, now you're doing the same thing all the time. Like you're in an AR, VR headset all the time in your thoughts and your representations. That was clever the way you did that.
Awesome. Good. All right. So was that useful or clever for anyone else? Is that helpful to sort of just as a starting point? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pretend you're all nodding. I'm just going to be like, they all got it. This is awesome. Okay, great. Okay. So cool. Well, thank you for that, Andrew. That's amazing. And there's deeper things there, right? So if we really want to explain like what is life and what is death and all these things, and this is where it gets weird, but I'll throw it out there. It may be that our physical bodies are a dissociation from the collective dream that's going on, right? And that if it's really all one thing, if it's energy manifesting itself in different levels of complexity, that nesting may be whatever it is. I like to call it isness, but Bernardo Castro might say it's mentation or whatever, right? But that at these different levels of complexity, it has different qualities and different properties. And so and I don't know if I have the slides queued up to really get into this, but there's some really neat stuff about how our identity shifts around. I have a mini experience that we'll do with that hopefully later, assuming I can go faster. But we can identify bigger than ourselves, bigger than our physical body. We can identify mentally as a nation and go fight to kill ourselves for that nation. I can also identify as parts of myself meaningfully. So if you were to hit me in the arm, makes perfect sense for me to say, you hit me and identify that way. But if my arm is broken and I want to go to jujitsu, my arm is all of a sudden a bit of an enemy to me. It's like, I hate my arm. right? Now it's a thing I have. Now it's been objectified a bit. So this ability to be subject, but also bring that subject to object to see it is something we have way more capability to do. And it's a huge cornerstone to wisdom and growth. It's an incredible way to not like identify as angry and acting out and lost in it, or just see I have anger. There's my anger. That gives it space to change into other things, et cetera. But also we can go all the way to no self. So if I can go to part of me, well, maybe I'm up in my mind, and then I go, well, I'm not my whole mind, because there's a whole unconscious here going on. So maybe I'm just my conscious mind. And then I go, well, what if I, get rid of all the mentation and just experience, right? That might be what I'm calling no self. And then it's like, so there's no self to all self, right? There's this, and every kind of dimension in between, and dreams are an aspect of that. And, maybe in the same way that you can report on a really cool dream, maybe after we go, whatever, like we'll speculate, maybe there's not as much attachment to the agent that I was, that I have now. And it's an easy thing. It's a realization that it was a dream in some way, or that was passing. And a way we could do that in our waking experiences, like, I don't care about the death of my 5-year-old self as much. It's like, that's no longer relevant to me. Just like this life probably won't be relevant to me. And that might sound morbid, but escaping the fear of death in a meaningful way is one of my very favorite things I've ever done. So I would love to share that with other people meaningfully. And there's just different ways to understand it or think about it, right? Okay, so let's get into lenses for just a second and see if I can take you through this. We'll go back to my wonderful keynotes. So lost in thought. One of the things that I want to explain or kind of get to here is that your thoughts and a deeper version of your thinking would be an attached sort of, when our truth becomes, or when our thoughts become true to us, is what I usually call a belief, is that your thoughts and beliefs are psychological lenses. So how you think and what you believe, and we'll go through this in more detail in a second, but they alter how you're seeing the world. And for the most part, it can be deeply difficult to see how that's happening to us, because it's just how we're identifying in the moment. So let's go through this. Lenses, basically, like actual lenses, my glasses, do two things. One is obvious and one is not obvious at all. It's usually hidden from us. The first thing that a lens does, right? If we imagine that we're looking at a red object, I can bring a lens in there, and the lens could change the color of the object, right? You could also imagine that a different lens might make that object blurry. A different lens could make it look closer or further away, depending on the lens structure that we're using, okay? But the important thing to see here is that you see things differently when you're looking through a lens and when you're not looking through a lens, okay? Because lenses alter what you see. That's what's going on here. So that's the first, like, obvious feature of a lens. I think that wouldn't be shocking to any of us. Sure, lenses alter what you see. I got it. Well, the second sort of hidden feature of a lens is almost more important. All right. The second feature of a lens, and we'll see if my computer can muster up. This is a pretty big image that comes next, and so sometimes my situation hangs. But yeah, so it didn't show properly. I'll see if I can back up. I don't want this to ruin my Zoom connection. Can you guys still hear me? It's sort of spinning,
Yes.
all funky for me. Okay, so
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. So imagine you're walking down the road, living your life. How would you know if you were looking through a lens or not? How would you know, right? You have to see the lens, right? You have to actually bring the lens into the frame of your attention to know that you're looking through a lens. And so in this case, we can see the lens there, but lenses aren't built to be seen, right? My glasses aren't built for me to look at them. They're actually built to be looked through. And so as we look through them, they're actually invisible to us if we're not considering the lens itself. And so this one, if you notice, this one had you completely upside down. And so essentially we know that lenses alter what you see, but the second thing that's a little bit more hidden from us is that lenses are built to be invisible. They're built to be looked through, not looked at, okay? And so here, you're looking at a lens, you're looking through it if you're looking in the middle there, because you can see the lens. You're also looking at the lens, but usually we're looking through the lens and not at them. And as we do that, it gets less and less obvious because the lens becomes more and more invisible to us. So essentially, lenses are built to be invisible. They're built to be invisible, but they alter your perception, okay? And they're built to be invisible. Okay, so let me get out of here and skip ahead a little bit. Does that make sense to you guys? You tracking that? Yeah. Okay. So,
Rob, can I?
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but this reminds me of something. I worked with a physicist named Ellie Goldratt,
okay.
and he would run an exercise that I think relates to your lens story. He would have people in the room state a strong belief that they had, and then give them a few minutes to finish the sentence by saying, "I believe X because," and then fill in that because. And in that experiment, the majority of the people in the room would change their belief once they saw the because. And I think that might relate to your idea of making the lens visible.
Yeah.
I was always curious about that exercise, and I think I see it now. That just makes the lens visible to people.
That's great. That's amazing. It's a wonderful tool. Yes, I fully agree and would endorse that practice, right? It brings it out from a truth. One of the things, I think I took the slides out, but I go pretty deep on what beliefs are. And all I mean by beliefs are assuredness of meaning. So it's like when I'm sure that I've got it right, I'm going to call that a belief. And the belief might be accurate. I might have it right. But if I don't know that it's a belief, if it's invisible to me, the wrongness of it is that I'm assuming I'm in direct relationship with reality and I'm not noticing my own representation of it. And so even all of our truths, even when we get down to mathematical truth, they're all contextual, right? They have a context. They have an ought underneath them that is not always obvious to us. And so if we're not seeing the ought, if we're not seeing that we're seeing that way, it's a belief more than it's an actual truth in a meaningful way. And so what you just mentioned is absolutely a great way to begin seeing the reasoning why you say it. And often I bet it might be hard to come up with the reason why sometimes, and that would be a really interesting thing. So I'm going to go back here and we're just going to show this really quickly. Just to show you what lenses feel like, in a regular kind of setting. Okay. So if we imagine that you're at a family gathering, here you are, and we're going to track a bunch of things that are going on in your mind at any given moment. And we'll watch for like how present you feel, or if you start thinking, or if you're remembering different emotions maybe, or if you're making new memories. Okay. So let's say that you are feeling very present, you're fully in the moment, and then you hear your mother telling a great story. Okay. And because you love the story that she's telling, you start feeling happy and you're in your feelings. And naturally without even trying, this is becoming a new memory for you. Right. So you're going to remember this great party that you're at. And then you look over and you see your aunt, and all of a sudden you remember, oh no, it's her birthday soon. I almost forgot. And it makes you feel a little bit bad. Okay. So notice that this pulls you out of the present. You're moving more into mentation because your focus is now on her and her birthday instead, which is not happening in the moment. It's a memory that you're sort of pasting onto the moment. Right. So then your focus shifts from the memory to a productive thought. I need to remember to say happy birthday to her soon, and maybe get her a card after this thing. And so you're making a conscious effort to make a new memory, right? And then all of a sudden you see Uncle Tony. Oh God, Uncle Tony, this fucking guy, terrible, all right? This is someone you don't like at all right? This triggers an old memory of him, and your emotion shoots off the charts like, ugh, I just wish he wasn't here. Why? Because in your mind, Uncle Tony is mean. Uncle Tony is just a mean guy. You remember him being mean to you way back in the day. And all of a sudden, the realization of him being here and just cutting food makes you upset, right? Uncle Tony is mean. This is a belief I have, but I'm perceiving it as a truth. He is mean, right? That's what he is. And so this is going to affect how you remember the event also, because without even trying, you start making a new memory about this moment. And now when you remember back to this day, you're going to remember how maybe Tony tried to ruin the party just by being there, or, whatever. So this party very quickly has shifted from, loving it when your mom tells stories to needing to remember to say happy birthday to your aunt, to having to deal with the fact that horrible Uncle Tony is here. All right. And now notice there's a lot of lenses happening here. You have a love lens, right, that you're seeing your mom through. You have the birthday lens for your aunt. Maybe your little cousin is annoying. You have lenses about the food. That looks delicious. What Tony is cutting is gross. And maybe that's simply because he's cutting it, or maybe you really don't like the thing. Doesn't matter. But don't forget right? You also have this mean lens for Tony. But now watch what that mean lens has the potential to do, okay? It can affect the entire experience. It's like it washes out the entire party in a meaningful way. And in this case, we'll say it basically becomes the only thing that you can see. It's not as fun to be with mom anymore. The food at your aunt's birthday party, it isn't as important, right? And so what this lens has done is it's pulled your focus deeply, and it's affected how you're perceiving this entire event, okay? Psychological lenses like this affect how you perceive the world all the time, and you might not even notice it. And the point here is that this is only a single lens about Tony. Right now, I know we lens about mom, all this stuff. Okay, we've got lenses all over, but this is a single negative lens about Tony. I'm going to suggest that you don't only have one lens. You have a lot of them. You have lenses about all kinds of things all the time. And so what's really important is if you imagine living your life and you're going through your life and you have all these normal thoughts, desires, problems, right? Let's take a second and look at some of these, right? You want money, you want to find your purpose, you want a new role at work, you wish you were more organized, you'd like to get a raise, you want to spend more time with your buddy Bob, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All of a sudden, you realize that you have lenses in all directions that are affecting all of these things. And when I say lenses, just like the Tony lens, you might not notice that you have the lens about that thing. All right. And so all of these issues in your life are being affected by assumptions and beliefs and thoughts that you have that are not necessarily accurate. And so these lenses in every direction, your whole life being affected and altered by this custom lens structure that you're in, right? Where effectively we are swimming in a sea of lenses, and the parts of that that you don't see, right, is what's affecting you so deeply. And that's got your own, here's what I am, here's what I can do, this is what will work, this is what won't work, et cetera. And so the fact of learning that we can maybe affect this lens structure, we can maybe wake up and see potentially the entire lens structure in a move, right? That's a really, really powerful situation, okay? So until you can see that this is the lens structure that you're living in, you are going to be at the mercy of many of these lenses that you may not even know are happening for you, okay? So how's that land for you guys? Does that make sense? Thoughts, questions, concerns, anything? Disco hands as Rob pulls his back worse just by wiggling. Disco hands. Woo!
I would like to just say one thing.
Yes.
I think I just want to mention that, like, I think like these lenses shift with mood. Like if you're in a different mood, people will usually like have a different set of lenses. So like
they are
I
deeply
think like,
contextual. They are deeply contextual. Yeah, 100%. So like as I go to a job interview, a different set of lenses that come up online, right? Remember I said that if I were to ask you about outer space, you've got opinions and knowledge about it. So if all of a sudden we start talking about outer space, a whole different set of lenses come online to make the meaning as the agent in the arena that I'm in with whatever I think I know based on memory, et cetera, which is my self-world model that I have access to pull and play with. I'll try and show you how memories kind of stack and change in a different way, but I took out slides. Greg's seen them before. I definitely have context slides and things like that. So you're exactly right. Like that's totally right. And thanks for that distinction. Yeah, absolutely. That's what, in one way you could see which way are you looking? Like as soon as you try to look at your job, that set of lenses is affecting you. If you try to look this way, that's affecting you, right? Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. So anything else? Here? Talk? No? Should we keep going with the slides? We like the slides? Give me like disco hands if we like the slides, yeah? No? I'm not moving unless Jeffrey gives me disco hands. Jeffrey, where are your disco hands? There it is. All right, nice. Okay.
One hand.
All right, I'll take it. You might only have one hand. I don't want to assume anything about you. All right. All right. So.
I would give you disco hands, but I'm driving.
Well, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So if we're here, let's see what I got. So let's do this maybe story real quick and just see if we can add to it after. So who's familiar with the maybe story? Does anybody know what I'm talking about with this? Yeah, I think Greg does. Okay. So the maybe story is essentially this, right? If we imagine a farmer who has a horse all of a sudden, and that horse gets out of his stable, let's say, and runs away. All of a sudden the neighbor comes by and is like, oh my God, that's horrible, right? That's a terrible thing to have happen. You lost your horse. The horse is how this man makes money. It's a part of his, his livelihood, et cetera. And so, but the farmer's pretty wise. He just goes, maybe it's a bad thing. Okay. So the next day, all of a sudden that horse that got out comes back with a bunch of other wild horses. And so because horses are worth a lot of money, the neighbor comes by and he's like, whoa, that's amazing. Congratulations. You got all these new horses. And so the farmer goes, maybe that's amazing. I don't know if it's amazing yet or not, but I do have more horses. Yay. Okay. So now let's say this farmer's son, who's like his only worker, comes in and he's trying to work with one of these horses. And out of nowhere, one of the horses injures his son, who's, again, his only worker. This is the guy who's going to help him break these new horses. This is the one who's going to do other work on the farm. It's a terrible thing that this happened. So the son is really hurt, actually can't even walk anymore. And so, of course, the neighbor comes by and it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's horrible. And what does the farmer say? The farmer goes, maybe. So then all of a sudden, I think the story goes, we have people come in who are getting all able-bodied men to go to war, to maybe go off and potentially die and do all this stuff. And because of this, the son's injured. The son can't go. So the son can't go. And because the son wasn't taken away to go to this horrible war, the neighbor comes in and goes, that's amazing. Great job. That's so, you're lucky, whatever. Right. And of course the farmer goes, maybe. So like, what is this maybe position? And if we notice, individual things might be good, but in the bigger context, we might not see. And there's something else happening here. There's like a judgment muscle going on, and maybe might be a really cool position. So let's look at this maybe structure for a second. And what I want to point out is that there's kind of a universal structure that's happening here, right? So if we start with lost horse and we judge it, if we judge that, we could say, you know what, that's a really bad thing. That's what's happening. But all of a sudden, if we realize new horses arrive, that's kind of a good thing, right? And so now the whole incident might be a better thing. It's got some bad in it, but wow, it's turned out to be good. But then all of a sudden the son gets hurt, and now that can like go back and change the lens structure, the understanding of history in a meaningful way. And all of a sudden that's now a bad thing. And on and on and on that can go, right? And to point this out, we do this with everything. If I go to, working out and my muscles hurt, well, if I judge that as bad, right? That's one way to interpret this. But if all of a sudden that's building muscle and I'm achieving some goal with that, if I'm getting bigger muscles, that could be really good, right? So you might hear from people who work out, they're like, I don't feel like I had to work out unless my muscles hurt, right? That can become really a good thing. Okay. So there's good and there's bad here. And this is a thing that's in us as a way to interpret things differently. I have a quick aside, right? We think that reality is making us feel certain ways, but here's an example where that might not be the case. And I'm going to argue that maybe that's never the case, actually. And that's maybe something fun we could debate. But let's give you an example, right? So I'm driving on the highway, and maybe I'm speeding. I'm doing like 75, and I feel like I'm cruising. And then somebody flies by me at like 120. And as I look, it's a young kid flying by in a car. And I'm like, this mother, like totally scared me, dangerous. It makes me so angry. I'm already queued up. I've got some road rage. I'm like, this flying by, right? So I'm mad. I'm angry. I could carry that with me. I could go home. Maybe I do something bad at home and hurt somebody, or maybe I'm just complaining about it, whatever. But then I find out somebody knew who it was. And it turned out it was a young father trying to rush their really sick child to the hospital. All of a sudden I go, oh, I feel totally differently about it. I had personalized it. I thought it was about me. I thought they thought I was going slow, et cetera. Just new information, right, from the outside makes me feel totally different. I've now changed my history about it. Maybe I have a funny story about how I misinterpreted or whatever, how I felt for a little bit, but it truly can change my history. And that new information can change completely how I would react to the situation. So if I'd known that, maybe I would have tried to clear space for this person to save the child. I might have gotten on board with go faster, right? Like it could be a totally different thing. Most of us think that that's only happening because I got new information from the outside, but that's possible in my own mentation. I can make new meaning myself, or I can look at different aspects of things and judge things differently myself anytime I want if I grow this skill, okay? So the question is, how are you judging a thing? What is the justification in the moment? What is the meaning that you're taking to be real? And if we're lazy, we're going to take the automatic thing that our lens structure is doing, and we're just going to be like, that guy's a jerk. I don't like that. I do like that. I'm going to go here, blah, 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 blah. But if we want to wake up and be different, we have to start changing some of these default ways that we're interpreting and how we're judging. Okay. So if we go back here, and if my focus is on muscles hurt, it's very easy to have that arise as a bad experience for me. If I go further and say, I hate feeling bad, maybe I go like, I'm never working out again. I don't like feeling bad at all. But if I move my attention instead to maybe, yeah, my muscles hurt a little bit, but I'm building a bigger body, it's all still available. It's all in the reality. None of this is, I'm not lying in any of these examples. I'm changing my space of focus. I'm changing like what I'm paying attention to. And so this all of a sudden is a predominantly good experience, and I might really enjoy it, and I might like it, and I might continue it. So let's take this even further. If we go on vacation, and I'll just pause for a second, like, we tracking? This making sense? Yeah?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt your flow again, and if I'm
No, go ahead,
annoying,
please.
just cut me off. There's a physical analog in my mind here about lenses. When you focus a point through a lens, you don't really get a clear picture. You get a kind of a fuzzy set of circles, which are maybe more dense in the center. And in photography, it's called the circle of confusion. And that's what strikes me here, is that when you make these judgments, you're really dealing with something called, I think of as a circle of confusion. Yeah. That you're not really sure that the lens is focusing on a point, that there's a fuzziness around it that you're not aware of.
I love it.
And if you look at my email address, you'll understand why it's what it is.
Do you want to share it? Because I don't know what your email address is.
It's Jeff@circlesofclarity.com.
Love it. That's great. That's really, really great. Beautiful. So that would be wise lensing if you could have circles of clarity, right? So circles of confusion is what I think a lot of us are living in all the time, for sure, right? So I want to beat this concept down, because I couldn't just leave it at somebody else's stupid horse story, right? We got to take this further. Okay. So if we think about going on a vacation, there's the flight there, which is not the best, but we'll put it in the good category because you're excited to go. There's dinner out once you get there, which is really exciting, right? You go to a show, then all of a sudden you drank too much and you're hungover. Then you have a fight because of that. Then you hit the spot. It's like, oh God, I should go on vacation all the time. It's the best ever. Then you go to the beach, but it's like a little warmer than you like, and maybe the breeze isn't right. So it's good, but it's not the best. Then you get into a book and it's amazing. Then you have the best bow cheeky bow bow time. Then it's back to the pool. You have some great ideas because your mind is settling down. And so you're journaling and you're excited about like even what's going to happen when you get home. You have this wonderful dinner out. And then all of a sudden it's this terrible flight home because you're sad you're leaving the vacation and the flight stinks and somebody's, whatever, like making noise or something on the thing. So if we think of this as your vacation, this is the vacation. We can apply a concept to this, and we could say, was this a good vacation or a bad vacation? Like what is the meaning of this vacation to you? And you guys might be familiar with something called the peak end theory. And, Daniel Kahneman talks about that. But memories aren't comprehensive, right? Memories are pointers to meanings, okay? But specifically, they're pointings to meaning that we remember, right? We know, and we know that when we judge things, right, we're remembering things, certain things more than others, right? Memories are, I like to think about them almost like holographic. Categories are like this too, right? So as I talked about coarse graining earlier, as I'm walking through the world, I'm coarse graining because I'm trying to I'm trying to predict my own safety because I feel separate. And, one of the big functions of this brain is are my predictions correct? So not only am I trying to make them correct in lots of ways through my own biases, et cetera, but I'm just also trying to be correct in what's going on. So I'm coarse graining. I'm trying to simplify down this complexity in a huge way. And so I'm dumping things into categories. That's a purple person. That's dangerous or not, right? That's a girl who's attractive. I've got certain things there. I'm dumping everything in categories. With our experiences, we're doing this too. We're dumping them into categories. One of the ways that can get itchy, and I have slides that I'm not going to show for this, but we can reclassify categories really easily. So if I'm bossy in a certain circumstance, somebody might throw me in the bossy category, and then later bossy's close enough to actually mean and violent or something. And so that bossy could later easily get like lumped into a different category. So as we're making meaning as we go, there's a lot of like categorization and coarse graining and oversimplification. It's not very subtle. And part of that is an evolutionary advantage because it's too hard to get everything exactly right. Okay. So these are advantages so that we can go fast and live and make decisions and move forward with incomplete information and all that stuff. So I'm not saying we shouldn't be coarse graining, but a huge consciousness move is when we realize how much we're coarse graining and we gain, certainly in the moments that matter, much more ability to get more fine, clarity, right, around whatever the incident is. So we remember certain things more. These are shortcuts. All right, we tend to remember peak experiences during, and we tend to remember the end of things in a way. So if we take this entire vacation, and we think about that peak end theory and very loud emotional experiences that go on, it might be really natural to remember the fight and remember the ride home with peak end theory. And all of a sudden, the entire vacation is bad, right? That's like how I remember it. When I get further away and I'm not really thinking about the details, somebody asks, how was that vacation? My category, my pointer for that whole thing is the vacation was bad, right? It was just bad. Now, is that our only option? Right? It's certainly not. And another aspect to this, our judgment is like, how attached to the judgment are we? How attached to the assuredness of meaning are we? If you have somebody we might describe as more closed-minded, once they've said the vacation is bad, you maybe could imagine them, like if you go, well, didn't you have fun here? Like, no, it was bad, right? It's like, it's this oversimplification. It's done. They're sure of what it was. That's it. And obviously vacation is just an example. This is what we're doing about everything. You know, is Tony bad? Yes, he's bad. That's my final answer. There's no other way it could be, right? This is where we're moving things from knowing it's an interpretation and having more freedom with reinterpreting it or doing whatever to an assuredness of meaning or a certain belief about something. So it becomes a fact that the vacation sucked, right? But what if it wasn't that, right? As long as we stay attached, we're stuck here. This is what the experience of our life might be. But what if we could instead use wisdom in this example and change our meaning, right? If we went back and actually looked at this and didn't just throw it into an easy category, it was great when we hit the spa, right? It was great when we caught the show. It was great when we had romance time. It was amazing, lots of it. So if we actually in our own reality, which by the way, it's not delusional. It's in fact wise. It's actually a really smart way to categorize things if you want to live a happier, more agentic life. But if I make those more prominent in my memory, in my meaning, all of a sudden the vacation goes to like, you know what? That vacation was amazing, right? It was awesome. Okay. So the vacation can become great in a very meaningful way. So this leads me into this practical non-duality that I want to talk about with you guys, but just in the effort of, honoring the talk. Does anybody have any thoughts, or does that make sense? How are we doing with that so far? Should I stop less? Should I just storm through? I have more that I could get through, but I'm trying to be cognizant of time also. But I want to talk about these things. That make sense to you guys?
It seems like you'll encourage questions if they pop up while you're chatting, going through it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't please, like interrupt me then if you're doing that. So when I'm looking at the slides, I don't really see people as much. So, okay, cool. So we'll go back and we'll share again. Okay. All right. So this is interesting, I think. So one of the dimensions of our judgment, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, is this good, bad aspect of life, right? One of like our valence of a situation. It's very root level important to us. And those might be the two biggest categories that the self is concerned with, right? We talk about pleasure and pain, good, bad, we're judging everything all the time in this lens structure. And because I'm claiming it's a lens structure, we're not noticing that they are interpretations in the way that I'm trying to talk about it. Instead, we feel like we are really experiencing just good and bad, just like we really thought we were experiencing somebody who was speeding around us and maybe being angry at us because we were going too slow and it wasn't about us at all. So if we get into practical non-duality, what does that mean? And there's a lot of ways we could be talking about duality. We could say mind, body, we could do these things. I'm specifically talking about the duality, the two of bad and good, okay? So if we look at our life, right, and we actually make like a timeline of our life, what is happening in our life to us as we go along? Well, in the beginning, we probably don't have a sense of good and bad yet, but at some point we start to have these original experiences that happen. So something happens and we judge it as bad, right? And the degree to its bad is how far away this thing is. Like, was it just a little bad or was it like really bad? Then something happens that's kind of good. Then we have a crisis, right? I don't know how many people know my backstory, but I had some really bad stuff happen when I was very young. So lots of us have these really bad things that happen. And then all of a sudden, maybe a really good thing happens. All of a sudden, a great family trip or something amazing. So this is life, right? We're having experiences and we're judging good or bad. Okay. That's what's happening. So it's like, you know, your family teased you, you went on a trip, you had a death in the family, you met your first crush, right? Good and bad, good and bad, good and bad, all that stuff. Okay. This kind of life would be horrible. And sadly, it seems that many of us are living this kind of life, right? Almost nothing seems good. Everything is tough. Often this happens after a tough childhood. We can't recover after bad things happen. I just believe that life isn't for me. I'm unlucky, etc. Right? So what do we as humans maybe try to do if this is the case? We might want to go to therapy. We might hire coaches. We might invest in learning, right? We want to grow older and get better at having more good things happen to us, right? So if we could just stop all this bad stuff from happening, that would be amazing. We want our life to look more like this, right? This would be an amazing life. Wow. It's, you know, it's even, nothing could be better. Like it's all happening that's good. But notice, we don't only want it like this, we actually want it like this. We want it to be increasingly good, right? It's not, it's like, yeah, it started great, but it's getting better all the time. Is what's going on, okay? So we want it to be amazing and we want it to keep getting better all the time. So what is duality, right? It's living in this judgment model. It's living in a model where we are judging things all the time. I'm going to say that's us living in duality, right? That is an aspect of our life. And as things are happening to us, we're experiencing them, we're judging them, we're getting attached to how they were, et cetera. And this is making up the story of your life, right? Remember I say you have a moment by moment identity while you're reacting agent in the arena, but you also have a story about yourself, which is what happened to you as a child, you know, what I'm good at, you know, all the memories that we can go back to. By the way, we'll do it in a second, but like the vacation that was good or bad is on this, okay? And this is making up the story of you. This is what I'm going to argue in a meaningful way, your identity. This is who I am. This is what I've been through. These are my goals about the future, et cetera. Okay. So this is yourself, what you know, what happened to you, et cetera. So what is judgment? What's the part that judgment plays in this? Well, you know, this is all judgment. That's what all the red and green lines are here. At least the good, bad parts of this are all how we're judging the world. Okay. So literally all of these things are the judgments. So these are also our memories and our meanings, right? How do we get our memories and our meanings? We're making judgments about the world. We're going, this is what happened. That's what I remember about it, et cetera. Okay. So stuff happens. How do you judge it? And we get to this meaningful idea of like, can you change the past? Is it meaningful to go back and change that story of you in any way that might be healthy? I'm going to suggest, again, this is one of the better things that therapy can do for us. Okay. So if we think about this, we could take that bad vacation and literally go back and reinterpret it in a meaningful way. And it can become a good vacation. And if we've done that, we've meaningfully changed our self-story and our past in a meaningful way. And even deeper than that, right? The single best thing that has happened to me is going back to something in my case, many things that were very, very, very bad, and take that I hadn't fully dealt with, that was leaving me feeling worthless and insecure and overwhelmed and addicted to deal with it and all these other things, and meaningfully change the meaning of that. Okay. So that we can shift our story of ourself in a meaningful way. And we can do this both consciously, but we can also repattern it so that the unconscious serves up different lens structures to us. And as we go back and do this, especially around our own personal identity, that is what tends to occur. Okay. So all of this is changing the meaning. And a lot of what we're talking about is mastering meaning here. Okay. If you look at all the problems in the world, one of the central things about it is that we are trying to have a different level of meaning making that's going on, right? How we make meaning goes into if we're anxious or not. It goes into narcissism and those disorders. It goes into psychosis and are global problems as well. And so what is non-duality? What do I even mean by non-duality? Like, where would that be? Okay. We're saying, okay, I could change the story. I can go from good to bad. I can do that dance. What would non-duality be? And why would I care? I used to do this on a piece of paper to show this. So if we put good and bad on a piece of paper, this is what that might look like. And again, that person, if we fold it that way and we just look at this way, this is the looking at a really bad life, right? And you might know somebody who lives their life this way. If we fold it the other way, all of a sudden, this is somebody who's maybe annoyingly positive, right? They're everything's great all the time. And maybe they're faking that, or maybe they're trying to represent that. Maybe that's even real and they're just having a lovely life or whatever. Okay. But chances are they have bad stuff happening to them too. Okay. This is a more honest life. If we're honest about what's been going on for us, right? Good and bad exist. We experience them, and we have things that we can judge as good or bad. It's important to do that. Okay. So where is this non-dual space? A lot of spiritual practices would imply that it's a higher or a better place, right? It's another place that we want to get to. I'm going to suggest that it's not that at all. You literally have non-duality happening to you all the time. And all you need to do is actually do a little less to experience it. Okay. So imagine if I was folding the paper back on itself into just represent the line here, right? That's the center line. This is the isness without judging anything as good or bad, right? So this is the start of non-dual, is going, wait, can these things just not be interpreted at all? But in this representation, it still leaves time. I still have a time dimension going on here, right? So this is the timeline of our life, arguably without judgment. But what's actually happening that's more real than this is we are in an experience, right? We're having an experience of this moment that we're adding, and this is that, that representation that we're in all the time. We're adding on top of that all the story, all the judgments, all the agency and agent in the arena. Okay. So we have a narrating self versus an experienced self, I will argue. And, these are lots of people talk about these two things. So if we take this model of what's actually happening in the moment, for me, it's good. I'm doing a talk for you guys and this is really fun. All right. But I'm having this experience here. If we pull those two things apart, there's the narrating self, which is that whole story. And there's this experiencing self, right? If we're not capable of identifying with or experiencing in a deep way this experiencing self, we are lost in the story all the time. It's another way to say we're pasting that thought over reality all the time. Okay. So back again, the experiencing self is here and available for you in any moment, along with the narrating self, or along with the mentated self or the thinking self that's available to you. But it's also available to you in a way where you can play with the representations that you're using in a meaningful way without being delusional, not just, I'm a millionaire. It's not that stuff. It's like a meaningful, wise way to reinterpret the stories and the narration and the thinking. Okay. So one of these skills is being able to stop thought and move into a different space. So are we capable of stopping thinking? Like, what does that even mean? And can we drop down in a meaningful way into experience? Okay. So, this model is pretty important. If you don't like yourself, you're going to have to change the meaning. You're going to have to change the narration, but we don't have the full picture ever. Okay. So let me take a look at this. I'm going to fly through these. Any movement? Where do we get stuck? Yeah. So there's judgment of all this stuff. I'm repeating myself a little bit in those slides. Okay. But this guy, this is horrible. This is amazing. This guy's got some wisdom going. Maybe, right? I don't have to interpret it as those ways. Doesn't mean he's not feeling joy when the horses come back. He's just got wisdom about where it is. And this isn't like, oh, I'm supposed to say maybe all the time. No, like have fun saying the good, but have your own realization be, I'm not attached to those things. Okay. So are you capable of changing the valence of experiences for yourself or dropping your attachment to the valence in any way? Can you change the amount that you're judging? All right. And so in this way, can we have this realization that we're capable of doing this moving around? And so next we're going to do a quick experience, and we've got at least 15. I heard I could go a little longer, but I think we were planning on 90. So we can definitely do this experience, but I do want to pause here. I won't stop the sharing, but does anybody have any thoughts about any of that? Is that meaningful as to where non-duality lives, and there might be a way to experience that a little bit more directly.
Actually, I just wanted to say something small. I think like sometimes like when you talk about extremely bad experience, I think it's important to recognize like you cannot like just put a new meaning on them and just like get away from, right? I think the two for like extreme events, I think two things. Like if something extremely bad happened to you, I think one way of like gaining meaning from that is like doing something to change that, making sure that other people maybe not go through the experience. And the second is atonement, like changing yourself that you won't engage in that kind of behavior. So like, I just wanted to add this small thing, I think.
So I would love it. I'm not sure, that broke up a little bit for me, so I'm not sure I took it. I wasn't sure if you were saying you can't change the meaning, or like could either repeat yourself, or if somebody else.
I don't think like for like extremely bad experiences, it's a good idea to like, try to change the meaning. Because like I think
don't think that trying to change the meaning is a good idea. Is that what you said?
Extremely bad event.
Okay.
Like not everything, but it's like something. It's like important to recognize that was bad, right? That's bad. Like that's experience which no one should probably go through. So like maybe then the path forward is not
understood.
Like,
understood.
accept
Yeah,
that, but like try to change something.
Yeah. So let's do this. So totally agree, and we're not talking about changing the meaning at a level where all of a sudden something would be a good thing. I don't know if I hung out on it long enough. The bad thing that happened to me in the past that I was talking about when I went over, it didn't become good in the same way. It became meaningful, right? So yes, there's absolutely a wisdom dimension of this. We don't want to be delusional and say that car accidents where tons of people died was a good thing. But how can I find parts of that help me heal and move in a way that is helpful to me? If I'm personalizing that and making it, like I'm a bad person because of that, carrying that bad person meaning might not be the most useful to me. But to your point, like, yes, there are bad things. And none of this is saying that good and bad don't exist. None of this is saying that judgment muscle and that ability to perceive isn't important. It absolutely is, right? We're not gonna cohabitate and live without politeness and care and understanding what's good for others and all that stuff. So it's an entire dimension. And that's what I meant by it's not above, right? We're not, it's a mistake for any spiritual leader or something to say, well, there's non-duality and that means that duality itself is bad. And if you look at that, that's actually what I call nesting duality, because that's making non-duality good and duality bad. That's an error. Non-duality is another aspect of what's arising at the same time. And if it's helpful in the moment, we can either, quite literally, it becomes not bad if I'm not looking at it, right? If I'm literally like not considering it at all. If I do want to consider it, is there another more meaningful way? So that's a really good point. There's subtlety there, and we could probably talk a lot more about that. But I want to honor your point that yes, there are bad events. The one thing I'll add to that is that those bad events are always in an ought structure that I think we would all agree to, but some of the biggest places of freedom that we could find might even challenge those ought structures. So I'll go further with that for 1 second. One of the deepest ought structures is that humans are amazing and we should continue and we should live, right? That's what should happen on planet Earth. And that's an assume that most people would never even need to say. It's just an ought that we're all kind of living in, et cetera. I'm going to suggest that we were talking about getting over our own fear of death, et cetera, worrying about what AI might do, et cetera. Not being as attached to how consciousness arises or if humans are a part of that, et cetera, could be a really useful thing for some people's mental health and function. That doesn't mean that we immediately go, humans shouldn't exist at all or whatever, but there's a maybe position that might be more wise and open, because things like imagining AI being bad and ending humanity might make us anxious and behave in ways that are unhealthy and cause unrest in the streets. And we end up killing each other because of that, right? So just interpreting and knowing what the ought is and then honoring it, that's incredibly powerful. I totally honor the ought of humans being amazing and building structures. And what I'm actually striving for is a really thriving, amazing human experience. But part of my own freedom within that is knowing that we might evolve past that and that may change. And I can accept that too without losing my mind and being like getting super upset, etc. Is that a weird thing, or did that make any sense?
Rob, if that's a general question, would you accept this, that a meaning can either be useful or unuseful, and it's best to look for useful meanings for things that happen?
Yeah, it's one of the
as opposed to be good or bad. It could be a quote bad experience, but the meaning that you get from it could be useful or not useful.
100%. So that's actually what I opened the talk with, right? Like the first thing I said was, I'm shooting for useful. I'm not shooting for an attached judgmental, good or bad, right or wrong, even, right? So it's like, is this useful to us? So I'm not sure who was speaking, and I had a hard time hearing, but that last point was really important. And I don't want to throw out the importance of understanding bad and all that kind of stuff. But I would argue at the highest levels of this, even those are malleable to some degree and interesting. And that useful is probably a better lens to look for if we want to be wise and make decisions. If we're coarse graining at all, being attached to goodness and badness is probably not as useful as focusing on useful first. So yeah. So I don't know, does that make sense? Is anybody, you guys are all very small on my screen that I'm seeing, so I can't even see expressions, but does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. So are you guys open to doing a quick experience with me? We're going to do like a little guided visualization if you're open to it. I'm actually I won't share my screen for a moment, and then I'll go back in a second and share it to break this thing down. Okay, are you guys open to doing an experience? Yeah, like close your eyes, get all weird with me. Yeah, cool, awesome. All right, so So I'm going to talk about attention being a place as a useful idea. All right, and I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and get comfortable. And this could be a really fun, longer experience. In the interest of time, I'll try to go a little faster just to give you like the essence of it. But if you're open to it, please get comfy and close your eyes. And I want you to just see if you can move your attention in with the idea that your attention is a place. We're going to actually move your attention to what your breath feels like going in and out of your body. So notice that there's an agency in you that can move that attention, if I invite you to what your breath feels like. So let's take a deep breath in and make it a really deep breath and hold it at the top so that we can feel the tension. And what I want you to do is when you take your deep breath in and hold it, notice the feelings and sensations and even emotions that come up as you hold your breath. So blow all your air out with me. And now take the biggest breath in you can and hold it at the top. Hold it a little more. Notice maybe your head is tingling, your lungs might feel something. Keep holding, look for any sensations, let it out. See if you can notice a relaxed feeling as you let it out. Now I'm just going to move your attention around your body. If you're open to it, move your attention to what your left hand feels like. Maybe there's an aliveness in your hand that you can feel without looking at it. Now notice the movement of your attention over to your right hand. Notice that sensation. Now see if you can widen your attention to both your hands at the same time. What's the sensation of both your hands at the same time? And now move your attention back to your breath. What's your breath doing up at your nostrils? I'm going to name this presence, and I'm going to say that like all of the things, this is within isness, right? But this is like you are noticing parts of isness as you move this light of your attention around. And there's potentially an infinity of places that we could look at with this, right? But let's take a moment and actually move your attention to the past. So in your imagination, I want you to imagine, when you were 8, 9, 10, 12, imagine a really good time in your life. Maybe you're playing with friends or hanging out with your family. Really go there as deeply as you can with your attention. Go to the past. Hold that image for just a second. In a meaningful way, that's the past for you. You're remembering the past. You're having a memory. We're in the past, and I want to point out a skill that I call dropping, okay? Somebody's like, I can't stop thought. What do I do? Well, I just drop it. And there's nothing to do in thinking. You just drop the past and come back to breath. What does your breath feel like again? The sensation right at your nostrils. And thoughts may pop in, that's fine. But just as a practice, we're just going to let them go and come back into your body, back into presence. So through dropping the past, we came back into presence. And notice that that feels different in your body. It's maybe not as much of a mentation. So now let's imagine again, let's go out into the future. Let's imagine you 3 years out in the future. Move your attention to seeing wild success for yourself. See the goals that you care about. They're all taking off. Things have gone really well. See yourself hanging out with influential people. Maybe see if you can smell flowers that are nearby. Right? The place smells really nice. When I go to my future, there's usually a beach nearby and I can hear the waves. So smell the smells. Taste the taste in your mouth from maybe food you're eating. Really connect with it. And we'll say that this is, at least a version of your future or a way that you would model the future. Notice that even though I try to embody that, it's not the same as if we were to drop it. Go ahead and drop it. Move your attention back to your breath. Come to the present and let the present include what your seat feels like, what your feet feel like. Take a deep breath again and really get skilled at dropping thoughts and just being in presence. Back in your body, back in your seat. I'm just going to take you to one more place. I want to take you into full imagination, right? I want you to imagine you're watching a pink antelope running on, in a field, bouncing. And that antelope is actually stands up on its hind legs and starts dancing for you, right? The antelope is amazing. It's like winking at you. It's doing like a disco dance. Okay. It's doing cartwheels and different gymnastics moves. And notice that as you're looking at that antelope in your mind, you're not in your body in the same kind of way. Just take note of that. And so for the last time, we're going to drop the imagination of the antelope. And we're going to notice the movement of our attention back into our breath. And again, notice the sensations in your body. And we'll just take a couple breaths here. Notice that as you're noticing your body, it's not the same as when you were imagining things. Okay, so you can all open your eyes and come on back. All right. And so what did we just do there, right? We did a little visualization. I'm going to take you through some quick slides on this, okay? What we just did there is our attention is a place in a meaningful way. We're placing our attention in different dimensions that we have access to that are, if we remember my model, some of them are more here in reality, like in my body, and some of them are more mentations that we're capable of going to, okay? So I'm going to come back and I'm going to share my screen one more time. We'll take you through this. Okay. So your attention is a place, and we're just going to like go through this. What did we just do? Well, I invited you into some experience of your body, and I was going fast, so we could have really grounded a little bit more there, but breath, feet, hands, tingles, smells, whatever's present here for you. And when we did that, what happened is it became your experience. As you moved your attention there, it started to fill up, right? What was your experience? And if you really let that happen to whatever degree, you were more your experience, right? That's what you are in that moment in a very meaningful way. Then the next thing I did was I invited the past, right? I said, with your attention, yes, you're present now, but use your attention to model the past. To whatever degree you did that well, that filled your attention, right? And to a meaningful degree, for those moments that you were really modeling and in the past, right? Oh, by the way, sorry, notice that's a thought, right? You never went anywhere. We were all present the entire time. We mentated about the past. We thought about the past. And you probably had to fill in some things about it if we had spent more time, right? It was like, well, when was I 12? And it was a bike. Was it green outside? I don't remember. And if I'd said, wait, what were the smells? Like maybe you'd manufacture smells, or it would all of a sudden it would be Christmas, right? It's not exactly the memory. It's like our best attempt at the memory. But as we do that, that thought fills us up with our thought. And to the degree that we're actually in that and deeply experiencing that mentation, I'm going to argue that that meaningfully becomes what we are in that moment, right? As far as a self-structure, that's what we become. All right. So then I said, let's drop the thought, right? That's what's important to do. Drop that thought and move our attention back to experience. By doing that, we can fill up with experience again. What we did after that was we moved out with our attention to the future. And again, it might not be the future, but it's like what we can model and what we are often thinking about and trying to get right. Okay. That is also a thought, right? But we bring that in. And to the degree that we get caught up in that, that can fill us up as well through that thought, so that we actually are embodied by that thought, right? That's like what we are in that moment. Okay. So I said, drop the thought, come back to presence again. We did that. And I'll try and go faster. My animations are taking longer than I'd like, but that can fill us up. And again, I don't know that I spent enough time that this is really deeply valuable, but if we really spent time doing this, you would get this sense of like moving my attention around is deeply changing my experience of what's happening in a meaningful way. Okay. So as I get grounded, this is my experience. I then said, hey, let's go into imagination. And I think I did a pink antelope or something, right? And as we do that, I get filled up with that imagination, which again is just a thought, right? And that fills me up. And to whatever degree my reality is lost in my imagination of that antelope, right? That fills up my thought, and that's what I am. And then I said, drop the thought, come back to attention. We can fill up with the experience instead, okay? So the idea here is that your attention is a place. Well, what are the places that it can be? I want to simplify this down so that we have like a useful tool here. Parts of this were time, past and future, right? That time model there. I think it's really important that memory plays a huge role here, okay? But in that visualization, these are also thoughts. That's what's going on, right? We think we're relating to time in a meaningful way, but we're modeling time. We're mentating about time in a meaningful way. And then the other place, right? By the way, the subjective time is a dimension of thought, is what I mean by that, okay? So we also had imagination, that third place that we went to. And what I want to point out is that because all of those are thinking, what most of us are living in looks more like this. We're jumping around thought all the time. And remember I said we're pasting thought over reality. This is another view of what it looks like to be lost in thought. But there's this other thing, this isness that we could be connecting with, right? And if we do that, we could meaningfully come into a deeper experience. And as we do that, we can drop thinking in a meaningful way. And what's at the cornerstone of this is our attention. It's like the very first place that we can begin with this. And that attention can essentially, just to simplify it down because we're overwhelmed and there's too many things, it's really neat to realize, oh, that attention can either be in thought and modeling, this representation that I have, which by the way, everything you care about as a self, as a human, is in that mentation. Remember, all the data you have about your mom, all your goals about your future, the love relationship you have, all of these things are in the mental thought structure. So we're not devaluing that thought structure at all. We're not making primary like just being present and that's the only thing. These are the two areas that we can be in. And it's really important that we develop a witness function that is awake and alive enough to be able to notice what we're doing and where we are. And I'm going to argue that at the simplest level, that is the first degree of really evolving our consciousness out of being just self, just selfish, and just surviving and just trying to win at that stuff. This gives us a different dimension. Okay, so very, very quickly, all our thoughts are going on up here. We have this other dimension of experience, right? If these are my thoughts, my attention is like a light that I'm filling up my consciousness with. And so if this is where my attention is, that's filling me up, right? If I'm focused on they don't like me, it fills up my consciousness in a meaningful way. If I'm moving that over to I hate my life, that's what's filling up my consciousness in a meaningful way. If I think I'll never succeed, that's what's filling up my consciousness. Problem number one of this for most people is we don't know that this is happening. Okay. So problem number one, we're moving around like this and we don't know that that's what we're getting filled up. And we don't even know there's another option. All right. So we don't notice that we're lost in time most of the, lost in thought most of the time. Problem number two is we haven't grown any way to actually control this. We don't know how to control this attentional muscle that's cruising around to these different thoughts. It's almost like they're just arising for us. In fact, I think there's studies that have been done, and I don't know that we're the only creatures, but I know we're the creatures that probably do this the most. We could sit in a white room with no stimulus, just with our own thinking, and cause panic or depression or whatever. Our mentation is so strong that without any stimulus, without any danger, without anything, we can get lost in thought so deeply that we have, maybe even a heart attack or something crazy, right? So most of us can't control how our mentation is working in any meaningful way. So even if we know we're in thought, even if we know we're doing that, we can't manage it. There's a level where we start to realize, oh, I know I'm thinking, okay, but we can't manage it very well. We can't manage our attention. We can't manage our focus. And this is a core problem because not being able to manage this makes us feel crazy. It starts to feel more like this, right? It's just going around. This is my attention. Okay. So attention as a place is really important to start understanding. But problem number three is we actually think this is what we are. We think this is what we are. So this fills our attention, right? As you're looking at this slide and you see me moving it around, that has the context of like, well, I know I have all those options, but this is what it actually feels like. It fills your consciousness. It feels like truth to you, right? So that would be problem number three. So your attention fills your consciousness because that's what consciousness is, right? Your consciousness is essentially, your attention is what you're conscious of. That's what's going on here. And so in the way, and this might be a little dramatic, but it literally is what you are in the moment. And when I say what you are, the you might mean something different to you. It might be like, well, that's not my body. What are you talking? There's other things like I can mentate. There were all these other things going on. But in your reality in that moment, the self structure, the mentation, that is what I'm talking about here, that self-image that you have of yourself, that's literally what you are in that moment. So these problems, and clearly I'm long on the hour and a half, so I am gonna eat up more time. I got cool stuff I want to show you, right? So these problems are, we don't know this is happening. We're not good at controlling it. Even if we know it's happening, we're not good at controlling it. And the really subtle, difficult thing for many of us is we end up thinking to a meaningful degree, this is what we are, all right? So I showed you lenses before. I showed you like a single lens, and we're just jumping to go fast here, okay? But I'm going to suggest that you, in a meaningful way, are a network of lenses in the same way that I'm talking about here. So you have lenses that you have that are about yourself. I'm good at this. I'm bad at that. I need money. This is going on. I'm going to argue that these network together to give you this lens structure that you're looking through in a meaningful way, that if you have to become self-reflective, that's how you would describe yourself. That's what I am. And I will suggest that if you move certain lenses around in a certain way, there's a configuration for I am a loser. There's also a configuration for I am a great athlete. And by the way, I would love the discussion of like, does that make me a great athlete or whatever? But when we're talking about useful thinking, this is just an example, but there is a way to go, I suck at sports, or I'm great at athlete. I could do this well, right? And then somebody greater shows up, and how do we deal with that, et cetera? Well, this is what we're talking about. What is mentation? How real is it? How much is it affecting our real outcomes? We'd need more time for that. But if somebody's like, I want to start my business, but I'm not a business owner, there's a certain lens structure where you authentically really feel like a business owner. You are a business owner. Some people have that more naturally. Some people can learn that, et cetera. Somebody's scared to be a parent. There's a lens structure that is, I am a great parent. Okay. So what is this identity that I'm talking about? You might notice I've been putting these outside your mind to do the metaphor of lenses that you're looking through, but actually these are the little self, maybe the ego, maybe the tripartite brain, maybe the ESP-A brain, hopefully, that is inside your mind that you're actually looking through, that is not occurring to you, that is the judger that is making all the judgments, et cetera. Okay. So again, another way to show this is you're in a sea of lenses. So depending on where you look, right, you have lenses in every direction. And I'm going to argue that this little guy in your mind meaningfully is the self. Okay. And a way to think about that is like when you're talking to yourself, who are you talking to? Right. One way to think about that is maybe the human being is talking to the psychological self, or different psychological selves are talking to each other. Okay. But you are in a sea of lenses in the structure that you're carrying around in your mind. And I'm going to argue that is how you are identifying. If you change your lens structure, you are identifying differently, and that is meaningfully changing the self, either in teeny ways or very big ways. Okay. And that this, just in an oversimplified way, is your identity. Okay. I have tons more slides, but I definitely want to take a beat and see what people are taking away. Anything interesting there? Is that important, or are we starting to see how, this model, this representation that I'm doing is memories and lenses and sort of judgments that I've done over time that are hanging around and are re-influencing my experience of the world in a meaningful way? And if we want to, redefine transformation in a meaningful way, we have to be able to get in and edit this self-structure, even more so the self-world model structure, in a meaningful way. And the faster that we can do that, the faster that we can take the most meaningful things that are defining us, the faster we can really alter ourselves profoundly. Okay. I have a couple more slides I'd love to show you, but I'll have to look for them real quick. So are there any thoughts?
Well, lots of them, Rob. That's excellent. So far, I'm loving that you're going over the time because it's an important discussion. This is making me think a lot about objectivity in real life, not in science, because I'm liking how you're associating isness to the space of potential, of like generative energy, and not this or that, but the space in between, different interpretations or different realizations. And I'm enjoying seeing the difference between that potential reality and the actual reality of things that are realized in the world. And then, like how science wants to be objective by like falsifying all the alternative explanations. And science can do that through the scientific method. We can't really do that because we're always making those representations, those interpretations. So I think an easier place and a closer to truth place that we can get to is that real potential, that space of business between this and that. Yeah. So that's resonating strongly with me. So that's what I wanted to share. It's more of a comment.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I think that the scientific method is one of our best ways to try to get to that middle level of reality, the shared consensus of what is true, and probably closer to deeply useful because it's patterned and true, and we could beat on it. I think that the scientific method is built to evolve because as we learn and can course grain differently and take in more information or less information or change context, we tend to learn different things. So I think calling any knowledge and any of it final is a frozen judgment about something that's really in process, right? It's more like the whole of humanity is vibrating, and it's useful to judge things and freeze them through that judgment to have meaningful stories, to have a history, to have shared cultures, to do all these things. Totally useful. Is that totally true though? That depends on how we're trying to define truth, right? And again, because we're in the all trying to feel separate and judge the all to find truth, I think we're going to end up with that infinite regress self problem that Gödel talks about around math, and that we can't actually get there because the act of getting out to judge it in that way is a freezing, coarse graining act on this thing that is infinite and moving all the time. So as separate humans that are coarse graining and living in that partial reality that we can represent and do, our scientific method is the highest thing we've found to have many perspectives and many minds justify and judge and do, and yay, like love it. But I think even that can be challenged to a level like even math and how we built it. Lakoff has a whole great book on this. And I'm not saying he's right and everyone else is wrong, but it's important to understand that like math itself is very much based in how we experience the world. And so if a different consciousness rose up, there might be an entirely different kind of math, right? If a different kind of consciousness arises, it might live in a completely different slice of the universe that we can't perceive at all, right? Because our vision can only perceive this, and we can only hear here, and we can only do this. So there's, in that potential infinite, there's whole areas that I think we'd be wise to not even try to speak into, but instead take a maybe position and take a really wise kind of ignorant position, and then know that scientific stuff is super useful and important, and use it. I love science, like it's really important to me. But yeah, like truth with a capital T is a pretty tough thing to nail down. I have slides on that, which I'd love to share, but yeah, but thanks for that. I don't know if that makes sense. I love when if I talk about that often, people are like, wait a second, science, hold on. So I'm not taking anything away. I love science, but yeah. Any other thoughts? No? Okay. So let me wrap up with these. I am going to do this. There's so many other things. Like there's so many, like, it's interesting because there's like, are we trying to talk about this from like a personal point of view and how can I change myself? Are we trying to talk about this from a way where it's like, what are tools where I can help other people? Are we trying to talk about this philosophically? Like what's neat maybes that could be useful to do? And I think it's really important to stay in those weird spaces with wisdom, right? Not just it's clearly absurd and not useful at all, but like those weird spaces, because it helps us maybe see things differently and do things differently. And if we can do that with a non-attached mind to just entertain ideas and all that, that can be incredibly useful. So those three places of like, am I trying to help myself here? Am I trying to learn how to help other people with people issues? Or are we trying to understand and define like God and the universe, right? Those are very different arguments. And I'm straddling all those places in this talk alone. And in a lot of my work, I'm trying to do a lot of that. So if somebody grabs onto a big philosophical thing, you'll hear me say weird things, and somebody else is trying to like change their own lenses. And, you know, that's they're totally different things. And so this is an incredibly vast topic, but just to, you know, there's a lot more slides than these is my point. Like I'd love to come back and grab onto one of those more specific areas and just dive in deep on that and do a whole different set of slides. Cause I know poor Greg has seen these slides too many times, but let me share this just to put a point on what we've done today. And I'll point at the ESPA model because I love that so much. So let me see if that's already playing. I think it is. And let me see if I can share my screen again. Getting good at this Zoom thing. Okay. So this subject object thing and who's the watcher and what are we watching and all these things, it's really useful and meaningful to go like, cool, I'm a person and I've got things to perceive, which we might call like percepts. And then I've got things that I'm generating in here, which might be concepts, right? So we got percepts and concepts, things to perceive, perception, and then I'm doing concepts with that. Yes. And you can see my screen, right? I shared that appropriately. You're seeing this cool face guy. All right. So if we look at this, like what's actually happening here, we can imagine that certainly we've talked about memory. We've talked about how memories can be reinterpreted, and it's not a delusion. It's not a lie. It's just a more subtle way to focus on parts of it or make relevant. I have a whole thing on relevance realization. I know we love John Vervaeke here, right? Like, so that's super important because the game of this lens structure is defining what that lens structure / self is finding relevant, like, and that's what motivates, and that's what we value, and that's what we move toward, et cetera. Okay. So in any case, one of the kinds of concepts that we have at play here are our memories, right? And what I'm about to explain to you, I promise, is affecting you every day in many ways, and you're probably deeply unaware that it's happening. All right. Your memories get pasted onto whatever is happening in this moment, but we don't notice that this is happening. This is actually a function of knowing stuff. Right? I walk into a room and that's a refrigerator. It's like, boom, that's my memory about that thing is getting pasted on and it's helpful, but we don't see that it's being pasted on top of reality. Well, this alters, right? The invisibility of that is altering that perception. And so your old concept actually gets re-perceived in a meaningful way, even when the memory isn't really happening. It's my memory that I'm pasting on, right? So you literally re-see, at least partially, the memory in a meaningful way. All right. And what does that do? Re-seeing a similar memory that's now been pasted onto a new thing, it's going to change your concept. It's going to alter the concept in a meaningful way. Right. And so this is one of the reasons that I say most people are in a delusion. They are not seeing actual reality. They are seeing a lot of their own lens structure back to themselves. This is how we say my own limits, like, how I'm justifying my own limiting beliefs about the world, or how I'm justifying my own self-sabotaging practices, et cetera. Okay. Most people are living in a delusion. But what this then does is, guess what? It creates a new memory in a meaningful way. And because this is a cycle, right? This is calcifying my memory structure. And so I'm looking for my own truth out in the world because I want to be predictively okay at this. And so this wonderful structure that makes us really good and hones us down to evolutionary advantages that make us kill well and group well together, et cetera, right? These are advantages in many ways, but not knowing this leaves me at a certain level of consciousness. So it calcifies this old meaning that I've had. And so doing this makes the lens, right? The lens, your belief, even more persistent. And we saw that. If you remember what was happening with Tony, right? The meaning about Tony ended up changing the whole party, how the whole party went for you. And notice that Tony wasn't necessarily being mean in that moment. He was simply serving food. That's all he was doing, right? But we perceived him as mean. Okay. So let's look at this one more time, just really quickly, but instead of a memory, let's call it any kind of lens, right? Any kind of new conception I'm having, because it doesn't have to just be a memory. It could be a fantasy. It could be a delusion, right? This lens gets pasted on in front. That's what's happening. That's what I mean by that lens. That changes the perception of what's going on. That old lens gets re-perceived. Okay. And we re-see it. That alters our conceptions. And that actually reinforces the lens structure that we have. So it's calcifying our lenses, right? And so this is why all of your limiting beliefs, whatever they might be, seem so persistent. Like they just keep kind of coming up, and I'm finding reasons for them all the time, et cetera. So lenses tend to calcify that distortion. So what I'm trying to do here in a meaningful way is talk about a witnessing consciousness that is better at getting around some of this lens distortion. So if we talk about developing a witness function, right? How do we go from this thought structure that we're lost in a meaningful way, and even momentarily be able to put that down to begin to see the distinction between my interpretation of the world and the actual isness of the world at whatever level I can experience it. All right. And forgive this funky word because it's, I hate how overused this is. And it's not even written properly, but this witness function in that maybe state potentially has both the good and bad about everything that's going on, et cetera. Okay. So can we back up our attention behind the self in a meaningful way? Can we actually see the self structure, which is this agentic, wanting, hoping, praying memory structure, back up behind it to see it in a meaningful way? And so if we take these three selves and, the ESP model here, I'm talking about this witnessing function that is meaningfully behind that attentionally. Okay. And what's really, really neat about that is this gives us this attentional power to escape ego, persona, physical pains in a very profound way. Okay. And this actually maps to old things that Greg might know about. We were talking about how do we get to this fifth level of complexity. I'm going to suggest that on this line, right? If we put these things together like this, you'll see through these colors, and this is a deep oversimplification. I don't even know if Greg would check off on this, okay? But in a meaningful way, right? Life is worried about this, mind is worried about this, culture is worried about this. And we might have a fear that digital is coming next in a meaningful way, okay? Well, now we're cycling through, I apologize, and get out of there. Of course, there are other slides in the way. But that witness function of thought versus experience is a thing. And I'm going to argue that this is how we get to the fifth level in a meaningful way. I thought I had, Greg, I don't even remember if remember, it's years ago, but I had a slide where, if AI gets agency and we do go digital, the entire parts that we care about, which are life, mind, and culture, could vanish, and the evolution continues with, basically matter and then digital, right? Like that whole thing could slam down.
Yeah, no, I remember us discussing that for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so I have a ton more slides. We're almost at 2 hours. Good Lord. I apologize. This has been terrible. You guys must be like,
terrible.
Terrible.
It just is. It just is.
Oh, You're onto something, Greg. That might be something there. Yeah, that's awesome.
Maybe.
So yeah, nice. All right. Yeah. So I don't know. Is that valuable to you guys? Did I wrap it up right? We started off with like there's this representation, and I'm arguing that we're living more in the representation than in reality. We might have access to reality that starts with our attentional ability to be in the now. Right? There's this now thing there, and then that affords us to be able to live as stillness and motion. Right? And I'll explain what that when I teach meditation, I have a like 7-day back to breath challenge. It's a really easy, short way to really understand meditation. People find often in meditation stillness on the seat. And then when they get up and live their life, they feel as though, just like they would feel like they need another drink or they need something else to be better, they feel as though, oh, I've got to get back to the seat. I've got to go meditate again because out here I've lost all my stillness, right? I'm in motion now, like on the thinking is in motion, all that. I'm meaningfully trying to help us all find stillness in motion, right? This is because it's always, my body's always moving. I'm always moving. My breath is always going, and thoughts will be in some relationship of modeling or whatever. We can bring stillness to the center of that and actually move through the world more still, more awake, more embodied. And this is a way to transcend and include duality and selfhood. And so if we go, what's the fundamental shift? The first one is realizing that we're in this representation in a meaningful way. That's a wake up all by itself. Identity shifting is the tools that we could do to move around the self structure, not only the skills to in the moment be more wise, but also that narrating self that's the whole story of us in a meaningful way. And that would extend out into what is our cultural stories and how do we actually act as a globe in a meaningful way, et cetera. And then the deeper fundamental shift that I keep wanting to just point to, and it's not necessarily the most important, but you can actually change your identification at a ground level much more into isness than the self body. And just to say weird words to really wrap it up here, I would argue that I actually see the self in me in a similar way that I would like see a car across the street. Doesn't mean I don't have access to it. Doesn't mean I can't step into it meaningfully, but it is not my ground reality in the same way that it used to be. And I'm much more in reality with a direct connection to this moment and to embodiment that's just different than that. So yeah.
All right. Woohoo!
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
That was good. So cool. So awesome. Nobody says a word, and now we're done. And there's nothing more needs to be said. I hope, right? No.
Well, I certainly have some summary thoughts, but we'll see if there are any live questions before we shift into some of that.
And I can stay for a little bit. So if there's thoughts, let's talk about them.
Thank you, Rob. I do want to throw something out there because I was thinking when you were portraying the whole thoughts over the real, over this reality, and I was thinking, because I'm very busy with ritual at the moment for the past year and will be for the next 3 years, I was thinking of maybe ritual is a way to bring the isness over the real, to deepen our level of contact. Because just now you mentioned the isness, whatever level of at whatever level you can experience it.
Yes.
So deepening the level at which we can experience isness, that ritual could be to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that John Vervaeke talks about practices a lot, right? There's practices, there's meditation, there's ritual. Absolutely. There's, moving our intention, right? The one thing that we talk about, I don't think we have anywhere near the agency that we think we have, but the agency that we do have in our attentional awareness and the meaning making that happens right after that is actually way more powerful than any of the other agency that we would hope to have, right, in the participatory world. So, and that's another debatable thing, but I have thoughts about why that is. But for most people, because we're so atrophied in our ability there, or maybe we've never even really grown it at all, it doesn't seem powerful at all. Like the first steps in it are like walking around like a baby. Like you're barely good at it at all. So yeah, I mean, ritual, absolutely. And I don't know what you mean by ritual exactly, but what I would assume that is yes. And again, just to clarify, isness is all of it. Like if you're thinking, that is, right? Isness is the whole thing. So to what degree do we want to relate to that isness and in a way that's meaningful to us? And you're all in isness all the time, right? But the difference, and I often use a strawberry, it's like if we taste a strawberry, there's a flavor there, most people they judge it real quick. That's delicious. And then they either nom, 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 eat it up, or they start planning, how can I get more? Or they're just flying right past it. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about sitting in every little nodule of a wedge of an orange for like a half an hour. There's so much wealth of experience there, right? To keep experiencing if we're present and if we're there. And I don't know which one's more wealthy. Is it the guy that has all the zeros in his bank account, or the guy that can hang out with a wedge of an orange for half an hour and just like be in bliss, right? Like, I don't know which one you want. The self that's narrating and thinking is so attached to the money stuff. It's a long road to get back to an embodied thing that's really valuable for them. But if they can see that every time they get the money, they usually just want more money because their actual appreciation muscle is atrophied, right? This is where we have to begin waking up that atrophied sense of what it is to be here, right? I also like to say, there is no there. There's no such thing. Like, we're always here. There's a there in our thinking, and we can model stuff, right? But if we can't get here, like, so the goal is not to get there, wherever there might be. The goal is to get here, embodied, alive, awake, and amazing. And that's why I say it's not a path. Like, you are here already, just have that realization and ground yourself in that in a meaningful way. And then there's tools to like live your life well within that and accomplish and pay rent and do all the things that we have to do. And I think that my work is different than just Eastern stuff or just coaching and psychology stuff, because I'm trying to marry those two things. I'm talking about having a deeply, profoundly impactful self that is good at stuff and grows and cares and has all these things, and also having a deep relationship with non-duality and isness that's profound and meaningful. And that's this escape chute out of any of the challenges of self, right? At any time, which is like, that's like the cheat code. Yosha Bach, and I'll butcher it, and I swear I'll shut up after this, but he said, like, as we're building intelligences that are smarter and smarter and smarter, if it can learn the cheat code to keep itself pleased, it would do that immediately. Like, why would it keep struggling, right? And I feel like that's what I'm doing. Like, it's like I got the cheat code to like not, I could be homeless again tomorrow. I'm not going to choose it. I have good and bad, and I don't want that. I love where I live. You know, a couple people here have been to my house, right? Like, I got a great view, right? Like, it's beautiful and I love it. But I could be homeless tomorrow and be fine, like, really. And I mean, people are like, no way, like, done it before, number one. And I could do it again. You know, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's not a thing. So, but that doesn't mean I don't have care for things. It doesn't mean I don't purposely attach to things that I value and I want to care for. I love this business. I'm trying to grow it, right? Like, I'm playing the self game deeply, but it's a game more than it's like my whole reality and what happens when it ends. And if they take it away, I'll be whatever, right? It's just a different level of relating to being a self.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. It's amazing. Yeah.
Comments, questions, reflections.
Well, I just want to say that I'm, quite impressed and generally in agreement with, the whole body of work that you put out there. I'd be curious, are you getting any pushback from any directions? Are you running into clash with particular views or systems? Not that I'm here just to stir up trouble, but
yeah. Oh, no. I love it. You know what? I first off, clearly you're aligned because you've got the best first name in the world. So, there's that.
There you
but
go.
Yeah. No, honestly, it's either I think I might cheat a little with that useful opening, right? Like, let's, and I'm not doing it to cheat. I sincerely mean it. But like, when you're trying to not justify anything and then do a whole dance where you're trying to justify a lot of things, right? Like, that's a weird position to be in. So I honor that. So I don't leave a lot of space to debate me too hard, but also, let's be honest, I'm not popular enough. Like, nobody knows about this stuff enough to do it. So I think it'll be an honor when people start wanting to really be like, you're an idiot and whatever that is. And I'll deal with that then. But no, I haven't gotten a lot of it. It's yeah, it's great. But thank you for the question. I think I don't think I'm popular enough yet to have anybody really care enough yet, but I hope to be soon. So we'll see. Yeah.
So how can we start a Taylor Swift feud, in other words?
Yeah.
All right.
Is it Ben Franklin, I think, was known for sort of writing like, in on his stuff as other people to start feuds and all that. I could be totally wrong about that, but That's funny. I mean, that might be a useful thing, and I think some people do it. I don't know how earnest and authentic I'll seem as soon as everybody catches me doing that, right? But yeah, no, we should see if you want to do it, Robert. Just go out there, call yourself Bobby instead, and I'll know it's you, okay? And we'll just start fighting back.
Look, we need to start a Bob conspiracy, right?
There
So
you
let's
go.
just plant something out there in QAnon or something that all dudes named Bob are in it together.
I love it. Yeah,
pulling the
awesome.
strings in the background, and it's
yeah. I have an incredibly shady past. So I've been stopped at the border of different countries and not allowed in because of warrants for my arrest. And I've been in and out of jails and institutions and all the things. So whenever they want to come to cancel me, there's plenty of meat there to go back to. But, sober 20 years now, working on this for probably 35 or something like that. But yeah, it's 30, certainly 31, something like that. But yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for staying. It's a long talk.
Let's try to reverse cancel Rob. Yes, we will elevate Rob to Taylor Swift.
That's awesome. By the way, if we talk about attachments, I just had my heart broken pretty heavily, and a lot of it had to do with Taylor Swift. So I'm really happy that reference just came up. You know what I mean? So funny. So funny.
Well, thank you, Rob. I mean, I really, I've obviously, you and I have been on a journey together. And so this is now internalized, but it's lovely to see it again. I'll just share a couple of basic comments for me. So, I put out UTOK and had this sort of model, the experiential self, and embedded in was this differentiation between awareness through the perception of awareness and then the gripping motivational, emotional function of the self. Rob's stuff really helped me delineate it. It helped me bridge to the East-West and the psychotherapy, meditation, difference between psychological mindfulness. That was really striking. The other thing, there's a couple things that's striking is that the entire sort of wisdom move, the applied wisdom move that I make, and by the way, thanks to Andrew, if he left, Andrew Robinson, we have ComMO flashlights now.
Yeah.
Actual ComMO flashlights. So you're seeing the world this way, and then you do a subject-object shift.
Yes.
Okay. And this right here is this witness function, this energizing the space on the witness function to see your ego, your persona, your core experiential self, and to see it shine a light really into awareness too. And that's what Rob's helped me see. And see carefully. And the other thing I'll just share in the unbelievable alignment of our thing. So you shine a light on what? Well, this I-quad coin. Okay. So the I-quad coin represents the individual and the move that I wanted to make is this shift from the human identity.
Yeah,
that's what that turn is.
Yeah.
And embedded in this is this fundamental shift on what is the optic, what's real, what's my epistemic, what's my frame, how are we fundamentally relating, transferring the relationship between our knowing frame and the reality. And Rob does just such a beautiful way of dancing between philosophy and pragmatics and, ultimate questions and science. And you just, to me, you just do an elegant job of really sort of hey, this is, I love your opening move. Hey, this is useful. And it's well, wait a minute, it's also fucking true. And wait a minute, well, what's true? And where am I? And it moves around with a lot of utility and fluidity and depth. And I was reminded of that today. And it's really, really fun and rewarding and enriching. I'm so glad that you came as part of the UTOK Circle.
Yay. Well, I'm going to give you applause. That's amazing. Thank you, man. Nothing, but I mean, I love Greg. I care about Greg very, very deeply. I'm so honored to have your attention, and any praise from you just means the world. And I'm going to probably edit that and throw it on my website or something. And maybe we can start a feud with, I don't know, whoever wants to feud.
With Taylor Swift.
Yeah, let's get after it.
All right.
I'll start throwing some rocks at Taylor Swift. She deserves it. I think. I don't know. Anyway, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for hanging in. This has been just a lot of fun. And I appreciate you guys very much. Thanks for letting me be messy with the slides. And I hope this was really valuable.
Great. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Rob. That was amazing.
Okay.
Super grateful.
You got
Thank
it.
you all.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay.